get very excited for this series. It's like our third or fourth time taking it, but I too can speak from a place of coming out from underneath authority and being submitted underneath authority. So I have a very great passion for this series. We're going to go over a couple of questions. Some are on there, but I went at the back of the book to get some of the questions also because I like the ones in the back of the book better. So if you have your book, you can go to the back. But when you guys hear the word authority, what is your initial response to it? What do you guys feel when you hear the word authority? What'd you say? Obedience? Okay. Anybody else? That's kind of what I get too. Rules? Okay. What'd you say, Denise? Boss? Fear? Just a little comical thing for me. Laura's my direct supervisor where I work, and yesterday she had told me, Marlene, I need you to come into the office. So for me, it is fear as well. I thought I was in trouble. And so my heart was beating out of my chest. And so for me, it is fear as well. Authority figures, I get very fearful. It was nothing. But my coworker's like, what happened? It was nothing. Really, it was nothing. But anytime my boss asks me to come into his office, anytime pastor says, can you meet me in my office? I literally am fearful when it comes to authority figures. And it was, of course, my upbringing, but the Lord has, dealt with a lot of that. So that it is for me. How about anybody else? What'd you say? Yeah, same for you? Okay, how about, do you associate it with something good, being protected under a roof during a storm, or do you think of something negative like a boss ruining your life? Basically, it's like, that's what I said. Yeah? For you? Corrupt? How about you? Okay. What is your best memory of being under some kind of covering or shelter? And how did it make you feel during that moment? What is your best memory of being under some kind of covering or shelter? And how'd you feel at that moment? You guys are going to talk to me or I'm going to call you out. Okay, go ahead, Laura. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead, Denise.
I think at that moment, because I was so scared, but at that moment when he grabbed my hand and he prayed with me before, I went into surgery, I felt his covering. I felt God's covering over me through him. And just his covering over me in the weeks after that, he'd come to my house, he'd pray with me, he'd always make sure that I was okay. It was just such a fatherly covering,
Yes.
that I will never, ever forget, ever.
And that's the that's the promises of Psalm 91 that he was talking about, where it's the peace, the protection, and the provision that we get when we're underneath the covering of the authority. And who is under cover? What was it he was saying? Who's protected under that covering? Who? Those who are under authority. What has influenced the way you view authority? And has it helped you see authority more according to God's perspective or the world's? Whose? Okay, what has influenced the way you view authority? And has it helped you see authority more according to God's perspective or the world's? See, yep, I agree. Somebody's got to talk to me.
You're not gonna see it in the light of Scripture. You're gonna look at it based upon what we see in the world.
Right.
And oftentimes the world's action of authority is not always the best. I wouldn't say that that is across the board, but I would say that there is a tendency, most people get their viewpoint from that perspective, not from a biblical perspective.
That's what you were saying yesterday, right? I'm gonna make you
We were
talk.
talking about basically what you were saying, as I think naturally, we're going to view things through the world's eye because the jobs that we hold and the different things that we do. And it's like, I had many situations in my life where dealing with a superior boss or something and didn't go quite the way I wanted it to go, so we decided to have a bash party. So everybody that wants to talk crap about the boss is welcome into this meeting. So after listening to this and going through this, it really opens your eyes to be like, you know what, that is not something you want to do because you're just going to reap coals on yourself by doing that. You know, so was very helpful for me just in that sense because it's like, I want to be on the good side of it, not the bad side of it. So trying to take that and you could use it in your work life and in our church life as well.
I think that there's not a whole lot of godly authority in the world. There's not a lot of good authority. A lot of people in authority they lord over you. You have a lot of bad. It just leaves a lot of bad taste in your mouth. You have bad bosses. You could have a bad pastoral history. Like Erica and I, we've been under some, and I'm not going to speak negative against them because we were under their authority. But we don't always have a positive view of authority presented to us in the world, no matter where we look. It's very hard to find positive, wholesome, godly authority anywhere you look. And so that's skews our view or skews our mindset of what authority really is. Taking it back to the Word, comparing the world's authority to God's, it's completely the opposite. God's authority is opposite of what the world presents. Opposite. The world's authority is lording over you and all this. God's authority is welcoming and submitting underneath that, yeah, and God-fearing, yeah, there's points to that. But we don't really, in this world, we really don't have a whole lot of positive authority figures to look at and be like, wow, that is a good authority figure. Because
Well, then when you have abusive authority as well,
right,
I know I came from where I was like, you're going to earn my respect. And then when you get in this series, that's not true.
yeah,
And so I didn't learn it. He caught my wrath. And then you learn, once I got into this series, I learned, wow, you make decisions off your emotions and you justify your decisions and you realize you're unsubmitted in many areas of your life and God has to teach you.
yeah.
I mean, if you guys will stick through this series, you're probably going to find out where you're unsubmitted in some area of your life when it comes to not just spiritual authority, but authority, period. Because this is going to slap you on one side and then the other side, and then you're going to turn around and it's going to keep slapping you. I was shocked when we went through this series. And you will justify decisions in your life. You will come out from underneath the covering that you're supposed to stay under. And that's one thing we learn. And that's what the enemy tries to do. Instead of being covered under God's peace and protection and provision, he gets you under the unrest, the fear, the anxiety. You become vulnerable and you become where you're lacking in your life. And we seen all of that. And you justify your decisions. Like, if you just listen to your leader, he does look out. The scripture that says that it's the job of our spiritual leaders to watch out over our souls. They are accountable for our souls. So it's not just that they're being dictators or rulers over us. They are accountable for us. And I don't think we understand the depths of those things sometimes. Go ahead.
And I can turn up my own volume, but a lot of times we take the world's authority, and I can speak on this from my own perspective, is you apply the world's authority to your pastor.
Yeah.
And you assume the worst of your pastor's decisions.
Yeah.
When it's not really the truth.
Right.
Because they're hearing from God, and you are thinking that you're hearing from God, but you are, like he said, yeah.
I loved what he said.
Right, you think you're hearing from God, and you might have in that moment, but it's like when Abraham was told by God to kill his son.
Yes.
It was a test. God didn't want him to kill Isaac.
Right.
Is a test. So a lot of times God will change, not really change, but just you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
and so we apply, let's say that pastor told you to do something. And you feel, because you have a history with your old boss, that, he's just telling me this because he wants to be authority. But that's not the way God is. That's not the way your pastor is, But we take that and we use the only reference we have, which is the world. The only thing that we can see, and we apply it over here in the church, and it shouldn't be.
Go ahead.
So,
Go ahead.
So let me as a rebuttal to that. In the Bible, does it tell us that we're supposed to view the world's authority differently from the church's authority? Does the Bible tell us that?
it's authority. It's all authority. And if we, like even, I think he said it tonight, all authority comes from where? So while we have, in fact, distorted views because of what we deal with in humanity, we have to always, as Christians, of course, we're speaking to the church. We view humanity supposed to view it through a fallen state. They're a fallen state. But God's word doesn't differentiate between worldly authority and spiritual authority. There's no differentiation because in the world you live in, all authority is given by God, even those in it, which is really the hard part. That's where the hard part comes in because there are those, and you'll hear that in this series. He'll hit on this because there are those who will be negative, bad authorities. And, what is our responsibility? What is the role we are to take to that? And this is why this topic particularly is so difficult to talk about in our culture. In fact, more now than ever. It's more difficult now than it was even when we first did this years ago, because the mindset of people has changed so dramatically about authority. And we know that because we watch it. We see the disrespect, for the presidency. We see the disrespect for our congressmen. We see the disrespect for our police officers. And though anyone in authority, there's a huge amount of disrespect and disdain because of what you're talking about. Because we've all had those encounters. We've had the encounters where they are. And we do let's have roasted boss this week, and get together after work, and we'll talk about all the bad decisions. But that's in the scheme of what God is saying in His Word. He never differentiates between a bad authority and a good authority. He said they're all authorities. And at the end of the day, I mean, even Israel, if you go back, to Israel, did Israel have all great kings?
No.
They had horrible kings. In fact, the majority of them were bad. But God told them that's the way it would be. So it wasn't like so we know, going in, that's how it is. But then the response of that, though, and this is, I think, the part where that we as believers are going to learn through this series is, how do I respond to that? What is the proper biblical position, and how can God help me to do that? So that's kind of the flip of that. While it's true, there are bad authorities out there, what we have to be careful of is to assume that because that's just the world. Don't forget, even your boss is placed there by God. God put them there. It's just kind of the way it is. So anyways, that's my kind of a rebut, but also kind of think about that, because it is something that we really, all of us, and can I just say this, one other thing? Even in church world, for me as a pastor, I've had some really bad bosses, right? I've had bosses where I literally, in my mind, questioned whether or not they actually prayed about the decision that they're making, right? I've done that. I've never vocally come out and said that, but there have been times in fact, we had an incident that happened in our local church years ago when I was a youth pastor, and the overseer stood me on one side of the pulpit and the pastor on the other side of the pulpit, and basically said, you remember this? I think you were there, Veronica. Were you there? You probably were. You probably may not remember. But he said flat out, if you want him, pointing to me, then we'll make him the pastor. If you want him, then we'll make him the pastor. And it was based on a congregation that was all up in arms. My response was that, get me out of that picture. I don't even want to be a part of that picture. And I refuse to be, because I know that is not the biblical way. But did I get mad at him? because you know what? He's doing what he's doing, and he has to answer for what he's doing. But I have to answer for what I do. And that's really the key factor right there. So, Jimmy, you wanted to say something?
So you said a bunch of it. Everybody's answering of what they've seen and heard from the world. But as Christians, we're supposed to be basing everything that we do off the Word. And the Word tells us that all authority. Yeah. And so then when we take it back to the Word, even though things, and his example of Abraham. So Abraham didn't question, oh, I can't do this. This is, what about God? God gave him a promise, and he knew the promise of God, that God gave him was giving him a son. And so that he was going to kill him because he knew that even if he killed him, he's going to bring him back to life because he had a promise from God. We have the same, if we're going to go by what the Word says, we don't have to worry about the world, even if they're not treating us right, even if things, that, as Pastor just said, they answer for that. We answer for us. And so if we take it back to the Word, if we go to the Word and worry about what the Word says instead of what we see and hear.
Well, the one major thing I like that he said at the very end, because this happens in the church all the time, is when he had said about the small groups, and he mentioned that he had heard from the Lord. And we get this a lot, and I'm sure you get it a lot too, that the Lord told me I am to do this. And he kept going on and on and on and on. And the pastor told him, but we're going to do this. And he kept fighting about it, and then the Lord revealed to him how he was unsubmitted and he had rebellion in his heart. That's probably one of the biggest pet peeves when you're running an area of ministry and somebody's fighting against you. We should do this, we should do that, and they're telling you this, that, and you're trying to tell them we're going to follow what our leaders told us to do, and they're still trying to give their ideas, and they're literally fighting you on it. It's really hard, because you're trying to stay in peace, stay submitted, and do what we're asked or told, but people have their ideas of what they want to do. But I loved how he said, the Lord told him, I don't care how many souls you're going to save, it's going to be how submitted you were underneath your pastor. That was one of my favorite things. It was good. That is one of the biggest keys, I hope, that really stood out to you guys, because we all want to think we're all hearing from God. We probably might be, but ultimately, like he said, Paul or whoever, when what was it? I wrote it down. When James spoke, it was what he said, and we're all going with it. What he says is what pastor says. This is it. We're done, and we all come in unity. We got to get in unity. We got to get in one accord. We got to get in one mind, and it's submitting underneath our leadership. It gets better. And read the book. The book gets more detailed, and the videos are good. And there's another, he gives another series of it. It's a little bit older, but we're going to end because it's 8:00. Read the book. It gets more detailed. So next week we'll get into the sin, what sin is, and it's not what you think. So all right, guys, we'll get together next week. All right, invite somebody. They need to hear this series. All right, love you guys.